On the 24th of August 2025, an indie animation pilot dropped on YouTube by the name of Slander by Izzy's, a YouTuber who posts commentaries on all manner of internet culture topics. The pilot is a slice-of-life comedy that follows three early 20-somethings, Zoe, Alice, and Moth, as they navigate adulthood. The pilot has a real 2010s charm to it, or it does to me at least, which lines up with the kinds of things Izzy's chooses to talk about on the channel, so it's very clear that this particular brand of style, narrative storytelling, and humour is something they enjoy a lot, and it's important to them. But this pilot, and many others like it, also pretty much exemplify what I love about indie, the fact that people have the creative freedom to make things that appeal to them specifically, and allowing that to be the main draw, rather than trying to make something that appeals to as many people as possible for the sake of popularity, profit, or some other type of mainstream metric. But as indie animation has stepped into the online public consciousness, and due in part to the massive success accrued from some of the bigger known names on the scene, these metrics are still being applied to these more contemporary and lesser known shows, and it's been causing a bit of friction between that coveted creative freedom versus the expectations of the audience who are more familiar with mainstream conventions. And unfortunately, Wastelandia found itself in the crossfire of the latest wave of indie animation discourse. Why is indie animation dialogue like that? It's a phrase that just immediately sets off my heckles, because what do you mean like that? Do you mean like it's not following the typical rules of storytelling? Is it the formula? Is it the tone used? The use of words or phrases that would normally get censored out of mainstream film and TV? Is it just cringe in your opinion? What is it? What do you mean? And well, I might not know for sure, but there are certainly some things that I've noticed which are prevalent in the indie scene that I also fall into, so why don't we talk about it? Hello everyone, my name is fionapollo, and I'm an artist/animator who talks about everything animation, pop culture, and internet media. So in this video, I'm gonna go into my own speculations on the whole discussion surrounding indie dialogue that's popped up lately, as well as address some of the other topics that have cropped up around it as well, because this has also raised a bit of a debate surrounding slice-of-life shows, and even the idea that indie animation creators apparently have this Ouroboros complex where they only get their inspiration from other animated media and nothing else, which is weird. I'm working on my own slice-of-life animated shorts, so that's another reason why I feel the need to give my 2 cents on this, but my word isn't gospel, so if you disagree, that's fine, but feel free to let me know what you think of the discussion as well anyway, and if you like what you're hearing so far, please consider liking and subscribing. Any support is hugely appreciated. So what is it about indie dialogue that's been getting people talking lately?
You actually think I'd be cleaning bottles and listening to you and moan all the time if he wasn't forcing me?
Let's start with the dialogue itself. What exactly is it that catches people off guard? And from what I can garner from the discussions online, it's a toss-up between dialogue leaning a bit too heavily on slang or buzzwords that are going to date the series in a few years' time, the penchant for curse words or other such language that you don't typically hear in film or TV, which is probably still part of an adjustment period for some viewers, and also the fact that a lot of indie dialogue can come across as quite formulaic. It is important to note that indie projects are a lot of aspiring filmmakers' first foray into managing a production, so there's going to be certain things that receive more attention to detail than others. One of those, of course, being dialogue and sound design. As you can all imagine, the people who are usually heading these projects will be animators and not voice actors, since voice actors have a wider breadth of mediums they're able to shoot for. They might have a niche in animated media, but they can also branch off into other forms of voice work like language dubbing, for example. They're likely not going to be as gung-ho about managing an animated passion project as we are, and because of that, animators don't really have as in-depth of an understanding about what goes into proper voice acting, how to coach their VAs to get the desired line delivery, or how to implement proper sound design or leveling unless they have a sound designer on staff or have experience of it themselves. And very often, depending on the size of the team, that person is also probably going to be doing at least 10 other sound jobs, including sound effects or composing music. Another factor that heavily impacts people's ability to enjoy a show is that god-awful word that has permeated internet culture since like the early to mid 2000s.
It's kinda cringe. Kinda cringe.
I'll hold my hands up and say that I think a bit of cringe now and again is good for the soul, but I hate when the actual word is used within a show. The word cringe feels like it's become this sort of social kryptonite, and I think it often snaps people out of their immersion in media because hearing that word kind of sets off this subconscious anxiety of, I'm gonna be mocked for this. And no one really wants to be thinking about that if they're trying to just sit down and enjoy something, you know? But alongside that, what also ends up dating a show is when it references existing social trends or online platforms that are going to affect its its long-term longevity. So even though I personally liked Wastelandia, referencing real-life platforms like Reddit probably wasn't the best choice unless you're going for a kind of long-term sitcom-style show that riffs on current events like The Simpsons or South Park do. Even though Reddit is obviously popular right now, it is kind of on the same level as referencing MySpace or LiveJournal back in the day, because you don't know if these sites are still going to exist in 5 to 10 years' time. So the context of mentioning that site may be lost on future audiences. Not only that, but the reason most mainstream TV doesn't reference these real-life sites is because of the threat of legal consequence. Hence why sitcom shows tend to be some of the only types of media that can do this, because it's done via parody. And parody is one of the few types of referential material in media that is protected from copyright or defamation lawsuits. That's also the reason political cartoonists can get away with drawing all manner of things without consequences, by the way. Bouncing off of that as well, we also have the conundrum of, quote, social justice language. Now, this is a bit more touchy, because these groups can and should be openly acknowledged with the appropriate wording and language. But I think what can make this a bit contentious with audiences that also plays into mainstream attitudes towards this is that in addition to the heavy-handed censorship historically enforced by a lot of mainstream executives, the past 10 years has also seen a drastic and swift evolution in what language is deemed as correct or acceptable. This can apply to a whole deal of marginalized groups, from POC to LGBT to mental or physical disabilities, and how they are described. For example, Asperger's was the term formerly used to identify someone who had, quote, high-functioning autism, but that word and phrasing is now considered highly inappropriate due to not only a change in understanding and categorization of autism spectrum disorder, but also the fact that the man who coined the term, Hans Asperger's, was revealed to have ties to a certain German extremist political group. Not fun. So as a result, hearing an indie show brazenly use certain terms, for example, maybe the word polycule, which was only coined as an official term in 2010 to describe a relationship involving more than 2 people, can be a bit jarring, because similarly to certain slang terms, they are subject to change, and have done so very recently and in a very short span of time. That absolutely does not mean that I think they shouldn't be used, God no, they should, but I do believe it is something to think about when working on a script. Sometimes it isn't necessarily that a mainstream production was prohibited from using certain terminology or themes within a story, but more so the fact that some terms might be very new, and it's unknown at the time whether they would stick or have the context be reinterpreted in the near future. So it was often easier or better for the show's longevity to leave certain things up to interpretation. I'm also of the mind that at some point in the future, saying something is cringe is absolutely going to fall out of fashion because, let's face it, it is a form of internet slang, and using it is probably what's going to make Gen Z appear old or out of touch to the newer generations. It's already happened to millennials with other words in the internet lexicon. Who remembers the word pwned? Or smexy? Oh my god, do you guys remember smexy? I used to use that in high school, that's how old I am. But yeah, that's my theory. I think at some point people are going to be sick of being terrified at the thought of being perceived and just throw the entire concept of cringe in the bin. Feel free to come back to this video in like 10 years and let me know if I was right.
It's time for the last call. It's time for the last call.
Another big debate that ended up sprouting from this recent discourse is the topic of inspirations. It's no secret that animation communities online can be somewhat of an algorithmic echo chamber, and what I mean by this is that many people are motivated to discuss cartoons, TV shows, or games with huge followings that are currently socially relevant, because surprise surprise, that's what the algorithm is pushing to them. Speaking from the perspective of a YouTuber, you learn very quickly that sticking to discussions that pertain to current happenings within your niche is what helps you maintain and steadily build up a community around whatever you post. It's literally what I'm doing right now. I talk a lot about animation because it's what I'm most knowledgeable in. I have 2 degrees in it, but also because it's what my audience responds positively to. If you look at my channel, my videos talking about other stuff like the recent Wuthering Heights film adaptation don't exactly do great, but essentially what I'm saying is that the more trending animated shows tend to be what receive the most attention online, and for people who have spent near enough their entire adult lives and even their childhoods embroiled in these trending echo chambers, then obviously it's going to come across like people only watch cartoons and don't engage with any other type of media, even if that's not necessarily true. For one thing, it's not just animation communities that fall prey to this. Live action, sports, politics, all manner of media winds up having this similar issue in some shape or form, but something I've come to realize with online discussions, both good and bad, is that the ones online that garner the most attention are the ones that people don't feel like they can have openly offline. Most people in real life don't give a shit about animation, that's just the honest truth, but nearly anyone from your coworker to your mum to a rando on the bus can and will ask you if you saw the last season of Stranger things and whether or not you liked it. But when you actually look at these indie pilots and shows coming out, you very clearly see that while other animated media might be one flavor of their influence, it's very obviously not the case for all of them that that is the only source. The Amazing Digital Circus, for example, is very heavily inspired by the internet aesthetics of the 90s, as well as the 1967 book titled I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. The indie show Lackadaisy was originally a comic, and is inspired both aesthetically and narratively by crime dramas set in the 1920s Prohibition era. And Wastelandia looks like it was inspired by webcomics and games as opposed to animation. If I had to hazard a guess, I would say Undertale. It might be tangentially related due to fandom interest, but again, not an animated show. Even my own indie series Mint and Friends, despite, yes, being inspired aesthetically by slice of life anime like Nana and Princess Jellyfish, is also inspired by my own real life experiences of trying to survive the modern creative industry, combined with interviews inspired by Rolling Stone. None of these shows are inspired solely by other animated media, because making something truly memorable or interesting requires an understanding of multiple pools of inspiration. The only way you could feasibly achieve such a feat of having no outside inspiration is by using AI, which automatically disqualifies you from having an opinion on this topic whatsoever. Sorry, I don't make the rules. It really is just such a terminally online opinion to have, and in a way it speaks to how insulated these internet communities come across to the average person who isn't a hardcore fan within these circles. But if it was just people sharing these experiences about the internet, then that would be the end of it. But one other offshoot of this topic is that, according to some users, even in the animation classes in college, their classmates would only list a handful of primetime children's cartoons as their inspiration. And to be honest, again, I feel like this is brought up in quite a biased way. Like, yeah, there's no guarantee that many of those animation students in college or university are going to become showrunners or even work on the next breakout kids cartoon. And maybe it's a bit short-sighted to have that be the height of your aspirations, as opposed to branching out into other contemporaries of the medium and taking whatever work you can in an increasingly gig-based industry. But I also feel like this is like a non-issue. You're interested in a thing, you go to college and learn about it and potentially land a job doing it. If someone has the ambition of working on children's cartoons because they like children's cartoons, then what's the problem? Like, I get the assertion of broadening your horizons and taking in various types of art and media. I've spoken about that in past videos as well. But if those people say their inspiration is Sophia the First because they liked it as a kid and want to work on a similar cartoon that their younger family members or even future children could enjoy for a career, then fucking let them. Some people want to create the next Rick and Morty, and some people want to make the next Bluey. It's as simple as that. Not everything needs to be high art or be unsuitable for kids, and I feel like both the internet's want for edgier shows unrestrained by mainstream meddling and the indie scene itself tends to confuse people on this because they see shows like Hell of a Boss where there's a curse word per minute and assume that's what indie is supposed to be. But then you also have shows like Strawberry Vampire, which is very adorable by the way, that is also very clearly intended for all ages and chose to be independently funded rather than endure rejection after rejection from big corporate studios. It's just a matter of perspective and a matter of what someone wants.
My Franny? I'm still outside the door, child.
So the final thing I want to close out with is that apparently there has also been some contempt going around for the more low-key, low-stakes genres, namely slice of life. And honestly, that kind of wounds me because while I understand the appeal of the more fantastical and out there narratives associated with sci-fi, fantasy, and all of that, being able to write simplistic scenarios in an engaging way is not only great practice for budding scriptwriters and storytellers, but a well-executed slice of life story can be just as, if not more impactful than any other kind of narrative. And the fact that some of the arguments I've been seeing surrounding this draw upon the idea that it's boring. In my opinion, this speaks to the theory of more people than ever, particularly younger people who tend to be the largest group in the online indie fan base, just want something that is extremely far removed from reality so that they can at least have a short stint of escapism from the chaos of normal life. And while I do completely get that, everyone copes in their own way, I can't help but feel kind of split on it because I tend to view slice of life as a very idealistic and hopeful genre that can give you a glimpse into what the world could be like, while still acknowledging that, yeah, things could absolutely be better. I don't think many people are actually going into this thinking this way and being like, oh, I hate slice of life because of this. I definitely believe this is more of a subconscious thing, but it's just my 2 cents. I think what also drives this attitude is the fact that some of the biggest shows in the indie space at the moment are all very high stakes, experimental pieces that push against the historic boundaries of the mainstream. Has Been and Helliver are literally about heaven and hell being locked in conflict, The Amazing Digital Circus is a psychological drama where people are trapped inside a video game, and the highly anticipated Knights of Guinevere is a sci-fi horror thriller that is a commentary on the capitalistic tyranny of megacorporations. These are all shows with some intense concepts attached to them, and there are very few animated series that come close in terms of scope, which I guess is probably the biggest draw. People want something new and exciting, and Slice of Life just doesn't tend to offer that. It's often much more contained than the others, and is often viewed as a safer avenue for the less adventurous viewer bases. But these shows are still doing so much stuff that is vastly different to what we're used to seeing. Slice of Life in the indie space has the capacity to talk about subject matter or issues that were previously hardlined, and I don't think that should be ignored. I guess, more than anything, I just wish that people could extend that same enthusiasm reserved for these huge indie productions to the smaller, less exciting series as well. I enjoyed Wastelandia. It isn't a perfect pilot, but it's charming, it's endearing, and not everything coming out of the indie space at the moment needs to be this amazing avant-garde epic or needs to appeal to as many people as possible. That's the whole reason people are gravitating to creating indie projects. It's allowing people to make what they want, even if sometimes it sounds like that. In any case, thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed. This was definitely more of a rambly kind of video for me. I just had a lot of thoughts about a sudden topic that just emerged out of nowhere, and I just wanted to get them out. So thanks for indulging me. What do you all think of the indie discourse at the moment? Do you think it's as ridiculous as I do? Let me know down below. A massive thank you to my lovely Patreon supporters, as always. Thank you to my tip jar supporter, Pedanticat. Thank you to my YouTube peeps, Manuel Exon Gonzalez, Mystic Mind, Lauren R, Ash Valentine, Lonim the Hair, Craig, Edboy, Steph Doodles, Why Not Warrior, and Taishan. And an extra special thank you to my indie production supporters, Morgan LaFader Thin, Matty A, Kiyoshi, Roundcat, and Arsonist. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, a link can be found in the video description. Stay safe everyone, and I will speak to you all very soon. Bye!